Penn State football doesn't have a recruiting problem. They have an NIL problem.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Penn State will win some. They'll end up losing others. But at the end of the day, is the recruiting department in trouble? This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Now, the everydayers might remember him from the last recruiting cycle. It's been a long time. That was once upon a time Richie Schneiderite. It is now Richie O'Leary. He is the publisher of Penn State Rivals, Rutgers Rivals, and Connecticut Rivals, the UConn Huskies. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, you can keep up with him on all of those platforms, including X, where you can follow him for more of a recruiting reporting and recruiting on more than just Penn State. So we're going to talk about Rutgers in the final segment and how they can be the beacon of an example for Penn State recruiting in this modern day of NIL and everything else that goes on. But that's where we begin, Richie, because Penn State seems to be like, okay, they do get a win here and there, but behind it follows up another loss. And I just talked about this with our recruiting expert Brian. Like they just can't put a winning streak together, but it seems like there are more underlying issues than just hey, they win some, they lose some.
Yeah, I mean, NIL is clearly a factor with most of these top kids. It's the first thing they ask when they get to campus. They walk in, they're like, hey, how much am I going to get? And it's like, wait a second. Like it used to be, how much am I going to play earlier? How many people do you have at my position? Now it's just straight up, it's money. It's just money at the end of the day. And these top kids are getting the cream of the crop when it comes to that those big bags. You see schools doing it all across the country. Now, some do it for strictly high school recruiting. Some do it strictly for portal recruiting. Some kind of try to mix and match. And that's kind of where Penn State's at right now, whether it be to fill in voids at wide receiver, wink, wink, or some high school recruiting. And it helps. It helps with some. It hurts with others. Like a kid like Darius Dixon didn't really care a lot about NIL. Now, mind you, he's still going to get NIL.
Yes.
But there's some out there that just don't care about it. They just want their best fit. And then they think no matter where they go, they're going to get NIL no matter what. So it's just all about fit, relationships. But end of the day, you still have to recruit. Like I've seen so many kids turn down like a couple 5-figure difference in deals just to go to a school they prefer. I haven't seen any kid actually turn down over $100,000 and then go to the school he preferred. But it's just money at the end of the day, and it's tough to keep up when you don't have the NIL slush fund that some other schools do, and that's where Penn State's struggles kind of stem from.
And this is what it's going to turn into. Penn State will end up probably with a top 20 class here, I would say, in 2025.
Yeah.
2026 is off to an okay start, right? You have Messiah Mickens. That's going to be the face of your class. But then you're looking to get that top 5 quarterback again to continue this line, from Drew Allard, Ethan Grunkmeyer to Diabell. And you don't do that, and the dominoes continue to fall. And it's not completely entirely NIL related. Again, I've talked about the Diabell situation, but you don't have as strong of a message when you're playing. Essentially, Penn State is playing from behind in a lot of their recruitments that they prioritize.
Yeah, no, that's a full-blown fact. I mean, like I said before, NIL is hurting them. Diabell might not be 100% NIL related, but I know he has an advisor. I know he has an agent. And when you have that as a 15, 16-year-old kid, it's kind of telling me it's definitely playing a role. But Texas landed him. Brady Hart's probably going to end up in Michigan. So now you're starting to go down the pecking order of 2026 quarterbacks. Now they are going to host Troy Hun from I think it's Mission Hills in California. Yeah, he was on campus this week. So he's one to keep an eye on. If they don't land him, you're really starting to go lower and lower in this pecking order of quarterbacks. Now you have an in-state guy in Samaj Beals who's pretty good, but I still think he goes elsewhere. But they're not really pushing for him either. Gavin Sidwar over at LaSalle College High School is pretty good. I think he's a under the radar guy, and it could be like a late riser, like a Matt Zollers type.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll rise as high as Matt Zollers is right now, but I think he's a pretty good quarterback in his own right. But I do think you have to strike big in 2026 for quarterback. If you have to pay him, you have to pay him. I mean, you have no choice at this point. This is what everyone else is doing, and it's the only way you're going to get your recruiting to be consistent and on top, and not in the top 25 is nice, but you need to get to that next level. In order to do that, you need to be in the top 10, top 15. I know someone said, like, did recruiting rankings really matter anymore? And I was looking back and I found a video, and the one guy that was producing the video, he did a total deep dive, like an hour-long deep dive on YouTube of recruiting rankings.
Mm-hmm.
And he said over a 4-year span, whoever has the better recruiting rankings over those 4 years in total wins the game 74.9% of the time. So end of the day, you have to recruit better. And if you want to take that next step and stop getting 9-10 win seasons and start getting college football playoff seasons, and now it's going to help with that 12 team playoff, of course, but
Yes.
you want to do more than that. You don't want to just go and just be like, oh yeah, we're done. We made it though. Like, but we're out in one game. You want to go at least make a little bit of a run. So it's going to take some NIL. At the moment, I don't think Penn State has a ton of NIL. So we'll wait and see if they can kind of build that bank up a little bit.
And we're definitely going to discuss that further in the second segment, just the realities of Penn State's NIL situation. And again, looking to Rutgers as an example, and thank goodness you're the Rutgers publisher to be that expert on that side of it. Well, I will add that I want to add this about the recruiting rankings. You know, of course, you know, I don't like the inconsistencies. Like, oh, Rivals has this, but On3 says this, and 24/7 says this, and oh my goodness, ESPN doesn't even have them ranked. Like, ESPN's kind of the outlier there, Richie.
Yeah.
You understand that, but
yeah,
I think the recruiting rankings are better than ever because you have so many resources. You have so many scouts. I look back at recruiting rankings from 2011, 2012, 2013. And I'm like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? Who's this guy? Who's this guy? Because you really only had one window when you were looking and scouting these prospects once upon a time. Now you have more people to watch. You have more opinions to take into account, and you have more evaluations. So of course, recruiting rankings are better than ever because the industry, it's not oversaturated. The industry is a lot more thorough. So I think anybody that says recruiting rankings are bad, or they're wrong, or they're stupid, that you're wrong if you think any of those characterizations of recruiting. We'll finish with this, Richie, in the first segment. Penn State, you know, the moniker is dominate the state, and they're not doing that in 2025 anyway. And I thought 2025 was a really, really good class of in-state prospects. Zahir Mathis, Matt Zollers, Andrew Olish is still out there, right? But they continue to see a Cam Smith ends up going to Duke. Legacy is Anthony Seyko, Notre Dame, and Michael Carroll goes to Alabama. Again, is this all NIL related, or are there other factors where Penn State just maybe they can overcompensate and it'd be a different story?
I think every recruitment's a little bit different. Like Cam Smith, they didn't really like that much. I know Manny, of course, liked him, hence why he's at Duke and not at Penn State.
Makes sense.
That one's an interesting one. Michael Carroll had a little bit to do with NIL, but he also had a really good relationship with Chris Kapovic, I think it's pronounced, the former Michigan State offensive line coach, now in Alabama. So that played a factor there. Anthony Seyko really didn't have any interest in Penn State whatsoever from the beginning. Now he took a couple visits to campus, but it just seemed like he wasn't really interested in it, and that was it. And he just all Notre Dame all the way. Now Zahir Mathis, like another one. Now he's starting to kind of turn the tide a little bit. I think it sounds like he might actually visit campus this weekend. So Ohio State has him a little bit on the back burner, because he's committed, so to speak, but he's a little bit on the back burner for the sole fact that he has some things to do off the field that he has to take care of first before getting to Ohio State. Now, he's a stud. Like, if you can flip him, huge. And it's an Imhotep kid, so you get back in Imhotep and just keep building that relationship there. There's a ton of Philly kids. I think they have to do a better job building those relationships over there too. But they just they are struggling in state this year. Like, out of the top 5, they might not land any of them.
And that's such a weird reality, but this is the reality of NIL and what we're going to discuss further. Where Penn State's NIL stands, where it's going, and can Penn State again do anything? Again, can they overcompensate essentially in other categories to make up for what they might lack in NIL? That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is the place to get tickets to Major League Baseball games, to see your favorite teams, and they make it faster and easier to get those tickets. Prices, get this, prices on the Gametime app will actually go down as it gets closer to the start of the game. Killer last minute deals, all in pricing, views from your seats, and of course the lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets to baseball games. Now, Gametime offers tickets to more than just baseball games, other sporting events, concerts, comedy, theater events, all near you, and you can save up to 60% buying last-minute tickets. Plus, you can get flash deals where you save even more on exclusive in-app deals with select seats ahead of a game or an event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to baseball games and your favorite events with Gametime. All you got to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Richie's already kind of alluded to it, that in comparison to other programs, especially, and that includes the Big Ten, Penn State is not aggressive with its NIL. And Richie, you have admitted that Penn State's just not really in a good position with its NIL. I've talked about how the idea of success with honor, and going back to what, maybe Joe Paterno would have wanted, there is just a negative look, a negative interpretation of what NIL is. Pay for play, and that because it is used in bad ways. But I'm not going to go on. I'm not going off the trail here to talk about the bad intricacies of NIL. At the end of the day, Penn State needs to be able to offer resources that are going to pay prospects, that are going to play players in the transfer portal, and you have to be able to at least come close or outbid your opponents, and Penn State is not doing that. Richie, where do you think it lies in more? The fact that they just don't have the capability to do it right now, or the other category where they choose not to?
I think it's the fact they don't have the capability to do it, personally. From what I've been told is, like, I've talked to tons and tons of prospects, as you know. I had one prospect this cycle tell me word for word, if everything was equal, I'd be at Penn State. But I can't turn that down. And I get it. And when you're that kid, and there's such a small shot at the NFL, even if you're a top 75, top 50 kid, it's still a very small shot of you making the league. Now you have a better shot probably being that higher ranked kid, because that means you're number one. That means you're better than most. But it's tough, and they don't have the money for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm told they don't have the money because a lot of the older generation just is like, NIL, I'm not paying to play players. That's not how it works. It's college sports. It's amateurs. And it's like, they're like borderline employees now. You just got to get over it. You got to be able to pay. And then the other reasoning, from what I've been told, is that a lot of people, the older generation, is also really pissed off at Penn State for the sole fact that they won't honor Joe Pa. And that's a big issue. And until they do that, if they do that, I think NIL would flip like that, and you'll be like, NIL powerhouse Penn State, like, oh my God, what happened? All these big whale donors will come walking through. Here's the money. Here, we're done. I know people have speculated that Pagula was we're talking to Franklin recently, and they're like, oh, maybe he'll help with NIL. That was to help with the stadium. He's not helping with NIL. He's to help with facilities, and that's fine. That's great, because it's a $700 million renovation. So, it would be nice to have a little bit of help there instead of just borrowing all the money against the school or against whatever else. But it's all NIL related at the end of the day, and they need to do something to turn it around. I was told they're having struggles with even getting contact information from, it's a little bit of a push comes to shove thing, because the university doesn't want to just share all their donors, because you need them for facilities, you need them for the school itself.
Yeah.
So I'm told that they're having a little bit of a struggle getting contact lists and stuff like that for Happy Valley United and NIL support in general. Now, it doesn't have to go straight through Happy Valley United. If you want to donate 10 grand towards Nick Singleton or something, or keeping him on campus maybe for another year, probably not, but then just go straight to the coaching staff. You don't have to go through the collectives. The collectives are great if you want to do the monthly stuff, but you don't have to go through the collective. There's so many ways to do it. There's so many ways around it. I will say, I always encourage people, if you want this team to be better and take that next step, sign up for the Happy Valley United, sign up for the monthly plan, sign up for a yearly donation of 6 figures if you can. I'm not saying go bankrupt over it, but if you want Penn State to be good, you have to donate, and that's it at the end of the day. And right now, they're just not getting enough donors.
Penn State also is not located in a strong commercial area. Now, they're not far from, you could, hour and a half Harrisburg, right? 3 hours in one direction, Philly, Pittsburgh. But and this is where I point to a conversation that Mike Poorman and Landon Tengwall, former Penn State offensive lineman, had. And I like what they talked about, that the donation line, like there is a Penn State donation line that Mike Poorman says is averaging about $37 a caller. And I don't think Penn State should have to resort to asking the fan, because the fan puts up, merchandise sales, ticket sales, parking sales, all of this, and supports the team in so many other ways. And I think that's where the fans are exhausted. Like, this bill has been passed on to them. And I'm not saying, I can't say like it's the CEO's responsibility and it's the big business's responsibility, but that's where the other programs are turning to. So I'm not saying it's anybody's responsibility to front the bill, but if Penn State wants to compete with NIL, you need to do what Ohio State is doing. And Columbus has, like what Mike Poorman said in this interview, has Fortune 500 companies at its disposal in the local area. Penn State, there is not a single Fortune 500 company within State College. You have to be able to build relationships outside of the area where that is directly there at Ohio State. So that's what they're playing. That's what they're up against, is that this battle is so much more uphill than it is for Ohio State in Columbus, Michigan being close to Detroit, right? Austin, Texas, College Station, Texas A&M, right? Oil money, Miami of Florida, right? They're in these big commercial areas where Penn State is tucked away in the middle of central Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and there's a couple things you can do there. Like Ohio State had a ton of issues that a lot of people don't really know about with NIL up until Michigan won the chip, and all of a sudden they're like, wait a second, hold on, we're not allowing that again. And that's where they kind of came into play with NIL. That's where all these donors are like, nope, that's the final straw. We're donating. We don't care anymore. And that's why their roster right now costs well over $10 million for this season alone. That's insane. Like, to spend over $10 million on your roster for this year alone is just incredible. But besides the point, you also have to try to get some of these major companies in the state of Pennsylvania. There's such a strong bond between people of Pennsylvania when it comes to Penn State and Penn State football specifically. I think you have to just reach out to every single big name company. I don't know who's in charge of that. I know Mike Mowdy was part of Happy Valley United. Now he's part of the program and kind of helping with donor support and stuff like that. Dan Kabbalah, I know, is doing some stuff with NIL, but you have to just reach out to these companies and try to get them on board somehow. I don't know who you can reach out to. Go reach out to, like, I don't know, Yingling or something, and just be like, hey, we'll throw your name wherever you want. I don't even care about well, you can't really change Beaver Stadium, but you could throw it on the Yingling Field. I'm just saying, maybe. But you need to do something here and just try to convince these big companies. You have such a big alumni base that there's got to be someone out there that's willing to donate like hundreds and thousands of dollars, millions of dollars even, to bring Penn State to the promised land, and that would be a national title.
And that's what, and Penn State, I think, I don't want to say is already at a disadvantage, but when you're California, Florida area, right? These more commercialized, like, that's just what prospects 9 times out of 10 are going to gravitate towards.
Yeah. Okay.
It is already a tough sell as it is. Say, hey, especially if you're coming from a southern state, or you're coming from Texas. It already does a good enough job with recruiting the area of Florida, but again, they continue to fight these uphill battles, and now you add NIL into the mix, and this is the biggest uphill battle. So, to finish with this, Richie, is there anything they can do to overcompensate? Like, are the stadium renovations going to do anything, or is it just a matter of, until you get NIL in order, there is really nothing else Penn State can do? They can say whatever they want, they can do whatever they want, but they can build up any other project, even with the salary cap coming in. That doesn't mean, I want to be able to express that NIL isn't going to go away just because there's going to be a salary cap in place. Only money's just going to continue to shift hands. That's really all it is. So NIL is here to stay. So unless Penn State squares away its NIL, that's really where they are. Top 25 classes because of the overtime work that James Franklin and company put in. But until it's NIL focused, they're not going to be able to get back in the top 10.
Yeah, revenue sharing is going to be nice because you have a $20 million salary cap to work with, like you said, but there's still NIL on top of that. And most of these top kids that Penn State's trying to compete for, they're going to have to throw money at them on top of the revenue sharing. Like you could throw maybe $1 million at a kid over, you don't even want to throw that much, to be honest, on a high school kid. You want to save some of it for portal too. And that's where it gets kind of tricky. You can kind of do what some schools do. Like I said before, you can just go straight portal. Hey, look at Colorado. They're going to add 50 guys this year. This is cool. Like, this is great. Like, no connections, no gelling whatsoever. Just put them together, see what happens. Or you could go the high school recruiting route, what some other schools are doing. And it's like, hey, we're going to use this money towards high school kids because number one, they're cheaper. And number two, we can maybe keep them on campus for longer than a year. You would hope. And then we can just keep paying them like a little more and more and more every year based on how they perform. It's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. And I think until they get donor support, it's going to be insanely tough to get back into that top 5 recruiting class or a top 10 recruiting class, even at this point. Stadium renovations are cool and all, and that's going to help the school itself because you're going to be able to sell more premium seating. Cause let's be honest right now, Beaver Stadium has little to no premium seating. So adding all that stuff is going to be nice. You're going to be able to host a playoff game. You're going to be able to do everything now with all these renovations. Maybe even I think they speculated a Women's World Cup game down the line, but which is cool and that's awesome. And they started doing concerts. That's great. But end of the day, these kids don't care about the stadium renovations. The stadium already was all like it's top tier as it is, and it's old. It's not like anything fancy. It's not brand new. Sometimes new isn't always better, also. But the whole point of the renovations is just to build more money. And like I know they're supposed to get rid of a couple seats, but by getting rid of a couple seats, they probably not double the revenue, but they add a nice chunk of revenue because you're losing seats, but you're also putting in premium seats. And that's where all the money goes nowadays. That's why all these other schools are getting rid of this like lower bowl seating for even just premium seats because it's worth more. And seating and most attendance around the country is down. Now, maybe not at Penn State, maybe not at Michigan, Ohio State, but other schools, like you'll see attendance down significantly. So how do you combat that? You just go build more premium seats and get rid of the guys that have been loyal for 20, 30 years.
Those are all excellent points of, this is just, it continues to I think all of these are great points, Richie, because it continues to exemplify just the reality of where Penn State is. And I like what you said, that there is, at the end of the tunnel, there is hope that if Penn State can figure out NIL, they can be a top 5 class because of the way James Franklin and the staff recruit. They're really good at it. But again, it's an uphill battle that at the end of the day, I don't blame these prospects for taking NIL, especially with uncertainty outside of football. Life after football is uncertain. So I don't blame them for making the decisions. But now Rutgers has, 25 plus commits in this class of 2025. It seems like Rutgers they're starting to eat everybody else's lunch. So, wow, we're going to look to Greg Schiano and the Scarlet Knights and how Penn State can actually maybe take some pointers from them on the other side of this break. And today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So, Rutgers has NIL figured out. believe it or not. And I made a wisecrack on social media because for the longest time, the Rutgers athletic department hasn't exactly always been the best at managing funds, but and that was my point is that, okay, well, they're not managing funds here. But again, NIL and at the moment, right, at the moment in the present, this will change, but the school and NIL are separate. So Rutgers football and basketball, for what it's worth, men's basketball as well, have figured out NIL. So Richie, being the publisher of not only Penn State Rivals, Rutgers Rivals, UConn Rivals, what can you tell us about Rutgers' situation that Penn State could maybe take some advice from? Now, I know Greg Schiano is not going to go out of his way to say anything, but what is Rutgers doing that they've had the best, I would say the best recruiting class in program history?
It's definitely close. It depends how they finish up with these next couple kids. If they can, they're trying to flip DJ McClary, for example. If they can flip him, then they might end up with the best program or best recruiting class in program history. But they're not targeting those 5 stars and 4 stars, like top 100 kids, like top 150 kids that Penn State's going after, because they know it's just out of their price range. Like they're not going to be able to do it. So they're targeting those like the lower 4 stars and those high 3 stars with a lot of upside. They're just doing a really good job. They're beating out all the local schools when it comes to like the Marylands, I would even say Michigan State's because they're so involved in the Northeast when it comes to recruiting. The Dukes, the South, North Carolinas of the world, they're beating out Miami for a couple kids too. They're just doing a really good job when it comes to recruiting the region, and not only just the region, but they're also starting to stretch out that state of Rutgers, as Greg likes to call it. His big thing is all developmental program. He knows he's not going to compete for these transfers that are getting millions and millions of dollars. So his thing is, I'm going to get a kid from the start in high school, and I'm going to develop him into a 4-year, 5-year player. They're, like I said before, this is one of the programs that's shifting stuff towards high school recruiting over transfer portal. It's cheaper that way. It's just easier that way.
Cost effective.
Yeah, and when you don't have a slush fund like the Miamis and Texas A&Ms and Oregons of the world, to specifically name them, like you have to do something different. And in order to do something different, this is what they're doing, and they're doing a good job. Now they're doing a good job in state, as I think they have 6 or 7 New Jersey kids, but they're also stretching that region. Like I was saying, they're going down to Florida and finding some under the radar guys. They have a Georgia kid that just committed yesterday, who I think is actually really good. He's only been playing football for 7-8 months now. In his first football game ever in Georgia, he won player of the game. And it's like, okay, there you go. You got to find some of the under radar kids. They built great relationships with their kids too. Similar to Penn State, they're very good at selling these kids on their program. It's not an easy sell to go to Rutgers. I don't even think it's an easy sell to go to Penn State either, because like you said before, how do I convince a kid from Miami Beach to go to the middle of Pennsylvania? It takes some selling points, and it goes back to what I wanted to say before too, and I forgot. I know NIL is a major factor, but if you were able to give NIL towards like a Coach Sider, Coach Poindexter, I would take them up against anyone in a recruiting battle in the world. And I think if they can get their NIL together, I think it'd be a huge success for Penn State. And I would probably start shifting more towards my NIL towards high school recruiting if I was Penn State. I think it's a good idea. I think you're not going to compete for those $1 million players. Shift it to high school, and I'm going to develop these 4-star guys into superstars.
And Penn State's always been about that too. Like, don't break away from the trend. They wanted to, James Franklin has said this, that I want my recruiting classes to be very strong, and then we will use transfers to complement, because they understand building a foundation is more important in the age of, even in this age of college football, building a foundation, building chemistry, and then complementing them with an Arnold Ebiketie here and there. Now, I know Dante Cephas didn't work out, but hey, Mitchell Tinsley was very good out of the transfer portal. Go get 1 or 2 puzzle pieces to fit what you already have. Don't try to build the puzzle overnight, because, again, I think Colorado's going to be perpetually 5-7, 6-6 at the end of the day, because it's just from a chemistry still matters. Believe it or not, Richie, you mentioned, this is the last thing that we'll discuss here. You mentioned the idea that donors can actually just go directly to a player, like a Nicholas Singleton, for example. It doesn't have any of them, right? You can say, hey, I would like to donate to this player. Now, this is going to extend a little towards basketball as well, because the reports of Coleman Hawkins going to Kansas State, this isn't about what you know about Coleman Hawkins leaving Illinois, Hey, Penn State was rumored to land him once upon a time, Rutgers, anybody, but he ultimately lands at Kansas State, not because Kansas State NIL has millions of dollars to spend, but he worked with a private donor. And can Penn State do that? I feel like, is Rutgers doing that? Like, how do you even facilitate something like this so that you can't, it doesn't, and not about a transfer, but just in general, where you can work with a private donor to basically support a player?
Now that's where it gets a little tricky. Now you could technically just DM the kid right away and just like, hey, Coleman, how's it going? I'm so-and-so. I run XYZ company. I want to give you $2 million, but you have to go to Kansas State. Now, obviously, there's a little bit more.
I hate that. I don't mean to interrupt, but that's the pay. Yeah. That's the pay for play that everybody was like, you can't pay players because this is what's going to happen. Well, it's happening. So if you can't beat them, join them. So continue.
Exactly. Kansas State just landed, like Kansas State. This is who we're talking about right now. Like insane. You can technically just go right through them and just DM the kid and be like, hey, let's figure this out. I want to talk to your agent, your advisor, because they all have them now. And then we'll facilitate some type of deal. Now, the best way to go about this is probably to go through the program itself. Most of these programs now have whether it be an NIL GM that's like in charge of all the athletics programs, NIL, or some of them have a specific guy just directed strictly towards NIL. I know Dan Kabbalah, who I mentioned before for Penn State football, is one of those guys who helps out a lot with NIL. And just helping kind of to facilitate these deals. Like, I don't want to be like the coach of Kansas State and be like, yo, what the hell? Like, this kid's committing to me. Like, I didn't even know. Like, this is crazy. You have to kind of converse with the coaching staff and figure it out. But you can also go through like Happy Value United. And if you reach out to them, they will make sure if you have a $2 million donation for said player, they will make sure it goes straight to said player. They're very good with it. They're very good with like everything. They're doing the Retain the RAR program right now, which is helping retain the football program. But yeah, I think you could just easily do, if you're a $1 million donor or even in a 6-figure donor and you want to get it to a specific player or specific team, I think personally putting it towards the team is the best way to do it, because then the team can kind of distribute it how they see fit. Yeah. But if you are really all in on getting a quarterback transfer after this offseason, then by all means, like reach out to the staff, reach out to Happy Valley United, and you can get it done kind of quickly.
NIL, just the situation of it. I understand Penn State's perspective, especially, alumni. I don't agree with it, but this is what you're up against in terms of competition. The schools like Texas A&M, now Ohio State, just to name the few, do not care. The dollar amount does not matter. It is priceless to win a national championship and be competitive at the top level. So Penn State's NIL is not good in the present moment. To sum it all up, it can be good, and Penn State can continue to rack up top 5 recruiting classes, as you and I agreed upon, if they end up ultimately figuring out its NIL situation. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. That is Richie O'Leary over on the other side. Rivals, a publisher for the Penn State network, the Rutgers network, and the UConn network as well. You can follow him on X and other social media for his takes for those 3 schools, but also a comprehensive recruiting and college football, men's basketball reporting takes as well. Richie, thanks so much for the time, and long time no see, but glad to have you back on the show, and hopefully in the not too distant future as well, we can bring you back.
Yeah, of course. Always around and always excited to talk some Penn State football.
And as always, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Be a part of the discussion down in the comments section, what you think about Penn State's NIL situation, if it will get any better, your thoughts on NIL in general. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a like on the episode, share it with friends and family. And if you're not already, become an everydayer, subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And of course, don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.